Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to a very special online event today. It's called Discover Your Empathy Style. Feel safe, create clear boundaries, and activate your empathic superpowers. My name is Stephen Dinan. I'm the founder and CEO of the Shift Network, and I'm really blessed to be with you here just to also understand myself in a deeper way, because I often feel like some of the characteristics of being more empathic aren't necessarily resonant with the traditional male upbringing. And so I feel like I learn a lot from our featured faculty here today, and I know you're going to as well. So we're going to be here with Judith Orloff. She's MD psychiatrist. She's an empath herself, as well as New York Times bestselling author. She's taught quite a number of programs and always rave reviews from folks at Shift. So we're really blessed to have her back. Thank you for joining us, Judith.
Oh, I'm really excited to be here.
Great. Well, I want to let everyone know up front that we're going to have this time. We're going to dive deep, and we have an opportunity to really go deeper with a brand new program called Empathy as a Catalyst for Healing and Compassion. Discover the transformative neuroscience to heal, awaken, and lead with art. More to come on that towards the end of the hour. So, Judith, it'd be great to start our journey here today with a little bit of your journey and really uncovering and discovering your own empathic superpowers and where that journey took you.
Well, I want to say I'm continuing to discover my own empathic superpower. So it's a lifelong quest and kind of ongoing revelation. But I was brought up in Los Angeles, in Beverly Hills, and I had 2 physician parents. I have 25 physicians in my family, and I was a sensitive, empathic, intuitive child. And I was an only child. And so I couldn't go out to shopping malls and crowded places without getting overwhelmed by the energy there and the emotions. And I would walk out with some kind of ache or pain I didn't have before, or depressed or anxious or just overloaded. And I was that kind of child who was so sensitive. I resonated with nature, but did not have any tools to really learn how to block out negative energy. And so with empathy, which is so important, you have to learn how to block out what isn't useful to you and embrace what is the most positive. And the superpowers of empathy mean that empathy is a healing force. And as a child, I could sense that, and but I didn't quite understand. So my journey has been coming to terms with what being an empathic, now woman and physician means. How can I set appropriate boundaries? How can I be a happy empathic person out in the world? And, this is so dear to my heart because we're talking about healing yourself, healing your relationships with empathy, and healing the world. And so part of my practice is always, every day, in relationships, how can I be empathic? What stops me? What if I don't like somebody? So I've come to evolve this as a practice, as an ongoing spiritual practice for me. And certainly as a physician, at this point, I've integrated empathy into every aspect of my practice. I couldn't see practicing without that, and intuition. And so it's very natural, and I teach other physicians. But what I'm eager to share with you is some of my techniques, to be able to, be empathic and not be a martyr and not burn out. These are all skills that empathic people need to learn. And in our environment, in the world today, we need to come together as empathic beings. And one thing that empaths know is that we're all connected, on the world level, and that we're all humankind. That's not a debatable point. And so in that spirit, with this talk and also in the course, for us all to come together as empaths to celebrate our strengths and learn how to work with areas that are more difficult in terms of being an empath. And that's been my great joy in my own personal path.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing that, and the full arc from little kid being overwhelmed in going out to really serving humanity in such a deep way with this. So it might be helpful for you to share a little bit just what empathy is and the empathic person, and see the characteristics before we even dive into some of the practices to sort of help amplify the benefits and mitigate some of the downsides?
Yes, well, empathy is the most precious of human qualities, is what His Holiness the Dalai Lama says. And it is truly, for me, the most precious of human qualities, the ability to feel for another person, whether they're experiencing joy, suffering, whatever they're going through, no matter what you think of their personality or their belief systems. How does empathy apply to that? And that means actually feeling what's going on in other people. There's a spectrum of empathy. In the middle of the spectrum is regular, beautiful empathy, where people say, I feel for you. I'm so sad that that happened. There's a sadness that registers in you. And it's a beautiful thing to just say, I see you, I hear you. What you're saying is important to me. And then higher up on the spectrum are the highly sensitive people. And these are people who are especially sensitive to sensory overload and sensory input, such as light, smells, sounds, crowds of people. And they're very, very sensitive. So they need to learn skills to center themselves. But that's a little bit more empathic. And then high up on the spectrum are the empaths. And the empaths have all the sensory components, plus they become emotional sponges. So I might absorb, you might be sharing some form of suffering that you have with me, and I would absorb it without tools, tools, I would absorb it, which is problematic. And so we have that. And then at the very lower end of the spectrum, of course, are the narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths who don't have empathy as we know it. They're neurologically wired differently. And so those who are high on the empathy scale or middle in the empathy spectrum, they need to get this. They need to get this, that at the lower end, there are people who are not capable of empathy. Their hearts, their mirror neurons, their brains aren't wired for that. So that's empathy as a spectrum. And I want to say it's a little bit different than compassion. Empathy is actually, I'm feeling what you're feeling, Stephen.
Mm-hmm.
I feel what you feel. Compassion is, oh, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I'm going to send you some heart energy. But the empathy is actually being there right with the person and feeling it and resonating. It's attunement. It's how you attune to people. And it's a precious gift to be able to attune to people like that, not in an intrusive way, just simply in a neutral, almost vibratory way, where you're attuning with them, or you're attuning with nature. You're attuning with a beautiful rainstorm. You're attuning with the sun. You're attuning with a child, where you feel what's going on inside of them. And to me, that's an amazing experience. However, you don't want to take it on. You see, in part of my work, my personal work as an empath, and what I teach my patients and workshop participants, and what we'll be getting into in this course, is how to reap the joys of empathy. Not just being an empath, but empathy, to be able to feel for somebody else without necessarily taking it on, and learning how not to take on what isn't your own, basically. And so you can function at a very high level, intuitively, spiritually, intellectually, cerebrally, with empathy. It's all, and we could talk about the types of empathy, and you can see how it works.
So it sounds like empathy really is, there's a very direct meeting, or a kind of a lowering of our sense of boundaries or separation, and a direct meeting and attunement with another. And it sounds like that probably that being able to consciously regulate that is sort of at the heart of being able to work with it as a blessing rather than a challenge, it sounds like.
It's growth. It's evolution. It's learning how to be a better human being, how to be the best version of yourself. Now, how to deal with whatever blocks you from that. Or if you have resentments or grudges, well, it's important to learn how to work with those so they don't block you. The point of this talk and the course is to set our priorities. What is really important to us? What kind of people do we want to be? What do we want to add to our own health? How can we give to ourselves? What kind of relationships do we want to have? And how could we possibly help this crazy world? And it's very possible to do that as an empathic person. I mean, we could talk about the different types of empathy, which are cerebral, intuitive, emotional, and spiritual. They're different types, and everybody can have one, a main type, or have a combination of types. But when you explore the types, and this is what, you know, I'm excited about talking to you about today, it's learning how to attune to somebody. Maybe they're not even in front of you. Maybe they're not even in the same city. Maybe you could attune to people across the globe simply by virtue of setting that intention to attune. And I really believe it's possible to help others who are oppressed or suffering, who you don't even know, simply by sending them some heart, energy, and well wishes from you to them, and you send it to that area of the country, let's say, or a country that's in distress. And that transmission of empathic well-being can be communicated to them. I mean, I am absolutely certain of that. And it might come in the form of suddenly they feel better, or they get a second win, or suddenly things don't look so bleak for the moment. So they get a crack of light again. You know, so we can influence ourselves, our relationships, our communities, and the greater world.
Very fascinating. So I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the neuroscience as well. So it's coming from a understanding of the biological basis for it, and that maybe that helping us understand a little bit more how to navigate.
Yes, well, the neuroscience behind empathy is fascinating. There's the mirror neuron system in the brain, which are known as the compassion neurons, are thought to be hyperactive in empaths and activate when empathy is activated. And so the compassion neurons get fired up, and this accounts for our capacity for empathy. They've done studies where, you know, one member of a couple is in the brain scan and the other member of the couple is in the brain scan, and they prick the finger of the first person, and the second person registers that as pain in their brain scan. So what's happening to one, if you love somebody and you have a connection, what happens to one is registered in the other's brain, which is just so fascinating to me, because it's very spiritual, it's totally energetic, and it's also the epitome of neuroscience to be able to see that and document it, that empathy can do that. And so we have the mirror neuron systems that contribute to empathy. We have oxytocin. When you're able to bond with somebody, oxytocin is the love hormone. It's what mothers sometimes feel or often feel with their children. It's what you feel like when you're bonding with a friend and you're having tea. It's the best of bonding, and it's a warm, fuzzy feeling that women have it more than men, that men don't have as much oxytocin as women. But the women who are listening, and men, you have some, the joy of bonding, that comes from the oxytocin, and it's related to having empathy for somebody. When you really empathize with what your friend is going through, the oxytocin is flowing through your system. And then another element of the neuroscience is the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic nervous system, which are so fascinating. The parasympathetic nervous system is the nervous system that we all have that is about calming ourselves. It's about rest. It's also about digestion, and it's about finding calm. And so what we want to do is partner with our parasympathetic nervous system and the vagus nerve, which is the main nerve of that system, and learn how to work with it to calm ourselves down. For instance, you can sing, you can hum, you can chant, you could go in a cold plunge, which activates the parasympathetic nervous system and the vagus nerve. You could do deep breathing. And all these activities are what's called toning the vagus nerve. And so when you have empathy, that increases the parasympathetic nervous system firing so that you feel better, basically. And so you want to work with yourself, and we'll do that in this course. Work with yourself and your parasympathetic nervous system so that you can feel empathy, but still stay calm and enjoy it. And this, in turn, shuts off the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight response. And that fight or flight response can make anybody agitated. Adrenaline will be flowing through your system. It's the stress response. And you don't want to have too much of that. You want to at least minimize it in your life so that you can actively choose. When you empathize, and especially empathy with yourself, which we'll talk about, is so important. It's not just about other people, but it's about having empathy for yourself and feeling the biochemical benefits of that.
So I'm wondering, like, if somebody's in a very agitated state and they have a lot of fear or stress, and then when we empathize with them, how do we stay sort of calm and grounded and enjoy that connection versus like it kind of rubbing off on us a bit?
Well, one thing we'll talk about is loving detachment. And what that means is taking a step back, even one step back from the person. So the empath in you is not jumping into their body with them and experiencing, every bit of suffering that they have. Where I consciously visualize myself taking a step back and observing a little bit more and realizing that this is them. You can't be enmeshed with being an empath. You can't merge with other people when they're suffering and not pay a price for that. And the goal isn't to merge with somebody else. Is to feel what they're feeling and hold a space for them that would be helpful. No, it's not to get overly involved with that. And so that's important to know. It's important for empaths to know. It's important for those who just are interested in becoming more empathic people. But you do have to keep that loving detachment, and it's not a coldness. It's simply a choice on how you would like to view this particular situation. And how do you empathically listen to somebody? What's the healthy way to do that? Is what's happening to them happening to you? Ideally not. That's not a good listening situation. You want to be able to hold space for people and allow them to go through what they go through without you having to meddle with it.
That's a really nice framing. And I'm wondering, how does that manifest in terms of the languaging of empathy? So how we're communicating what we're seeing or feeling with somebody.
Well, the languaging and the tone are so important. If you're, as I said, the types of empathy can be spiritual, where some people relate to others mainly in a spiritual way. They see the white light, they see the divine in the other person. That's how their empathy connects to them. And then there's also the intuitive empath, who is able to get intuitive flashes and intuitive connections with the person as a way of connecting with them empathically. There's the energetic empath, who mainly senses energy and can connect to people even when they're not talking. Just non-verbally, because they can feel someone's energy. And then the cerebral empath is somebody who thinks empathy. And you don't want to dismiss that. They're not necessarily in their bodies, the cerebral empathy people, but they do care. And they care through a mental apparatus, which is very helpful. It's not, don't dismiss that. And so there are all those ways of connecting with somebody. And you have to find out what your way is, and you have to develop the language and the tone of voice to speak empathically. The tone of voice is very essential when you talk to somebody empathically. You don't want to be snippy or judgmental or rushed. You want to have a very, nice tone of voice, but don't overdo it so it's artificial. But just say, I hear you, I see you, and I'm listening. And you could set limits for how long you listen. You don't want to listen endlessly to somebody, it could be very exhausting. But if you say, I have 10 minutes to listen, and listening means basically not talking, the way I'm defining it. And if you want to respond empathically, that's a different exercise. But learning how to listen, whether you're a cerebral empath, whether you are listening spiritually to what a person is experiencing, it's about sitting and holding space and not feeling the need to get overly involved, but wanting genuinely to be of service to somebody.
So I have a question for you. So it seems like what I've heard is that a lot of times people who are more towards the empaths side of the spectrum tend to find or gravitate towards people who are sort of on the more lacking of empathy side. And so when you're in a communication dynamic there, I know you're getting at it a little bit with the setting of boundaries. How do you deal with when there's sort of, say, narcissism on one side, to the sort of the empathy doesn't end up kind of being a draining kind of process for the person who's more empathic?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you have to be discerning about your empathy. Empathy is precious. Your empathy, everyone listening to this, your empathy is precious. Your self-empathy, having empathy for yourself and what you've been through, is absolutely essential. All right. And having empathy for other people is essential. But you don't want to give it to the wrong people. And the wrong people would be the narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths, because they're not going to be able to return it. And you have to decide in your life whether you want reciprocal giving with people, but giving to a narcissist or sociopath or psychopath is going to get you nowhere but into trouble. You know, it's not going to give you anything, a full-blown narcissist, because they're not capable of empathy. And as you develop your empathy, which is, you know, again, a precious quality, you want to be really discerning about where it goes. And you can have empathy for somebody you don't like. You don't have to like them. That's not a qualification, but you do want to understand where they're coming from. All right. And why that's important is that it will unite all of us. You don't have to agree with them. You don't have to like them. But let's say you're in a work situation and you have a coworker, you know, who is passive aggressive, which is infuriating, where it's passive aggression is anger with a smile, where they say things and you just feel triggered by them. And let's say you do that and you're with a coworker like that. What you don't want to do is empathize with their behavior, but what you do want is to empathize with how to get through to them so that they don't continue this. For instance, if you make a date to go out to lunch with them and they're 20 minutes late all the time, you want that behavior to change. So you want to say, you know, I feel uncomfortable waiting here, and so maybe we ought to wait to make another date, you know, until you're able to show up on time. And so just being able to say it with the tone I just used, it's easier for people to hear. And so be very sparing about who you give your empathy to. You could empathize with someone for the main purpose of just trying to understand where they're coming from. Now, I feel strongly about that in my life. You know, in my life, if I meet someone, let's say I don't like or I'm triggered by, most of the time I want to understand where they're coming from, so at least I can accept them as is. I can see where they're coming from, and I'm not going to expect anything more of them, you know, after that. And so it's good if you want to read people, intuitively read people, trying to empathize with where they're coming from, and you making a discerning choice about whether or not you even want to be friends with this person, you know, is part of your empowerment.
Fascinating. And how about the other side of the spectrum where you have two empaths? Are there cases where you get sort of like overly empathic that you need to sort of have a different set of strategies for working with people who are more on the strong side of empathy spectrum?
Oh, yes. When I work with two empaths together, you know, especially if they're a couple or they're friends, it's a wonderful experience on many levels because you don't have to reinvent the wheel for this person. you understand where they're coming from. If they say, I need to be alone, or I need to rest, you go, fine, because you understand it's not a personal rejection. It's about an empath asserting their needs. However, if you're both having a meltdown at once, it can be very problematic. And at that point, because the intensity is too high, the energy is too high in the house, and you want to separate at those points. You can't work it out with each other. You have to go practice your own self-care, both of you, and then come back when you're more centered. The two empaths who are triggered together, not a healthy combination. That's not the time to work things out together. So
yeah, I wonder if you can give us a few like really handy, specific empathy statements that can help us in sort of communicating and relating with empathy in a way that's sort of really productive.
Yeah, just keep it as simple as possible and don't try too hard, but come from your heart all the time when you express empathy, or you're attuning to someone, or you're listening intuitively to somebody. You want to just keep it very simple. And, you could just say, I hear you, or that must have been really difficult, or I could understand. I've known people who've gone through that too, and it's been quite a challenge. Or I'm so happy for you, with that promotion. I'm thrilled, that you have found this house that you're so happy in. To be able to just say very simple statements, as opposed to, I don't see why you did that. That doesn't make any sense. Or the thing that irritates most people, or people the most, is that if you say, if somebody is sharing with you, let's say they went through a car accident and you're listening to that, and then you would start with, oh my God, I went through a car accident too, and get into all the gruesome details. That is the most off-putting thing when you're talking to somebody and you want to come from an empathic place. You don't want to make their story worse. You don't want to make it about you. And that's very common that people do that. And some of them do it with good intentions, because they want to say, I relate, I've been through it, which is fine. And that's a better empathy statement than going through the gruesome details of whatever you went through. And so you're not with the person anymore. So you want to weigh and measure that in terms of what you say. I tend to err on the side of saying less and radiating more.
Is there value? I've heard in some schools that there's like essentially summarizing what somebody said and asking them, is that accurate? Sort of like the mirroring back of the full content is
Sure.
supposed to be very powerful, but I'm just curious if you find that valuable.
Sure, that could be. You can mirror back what I hear you said, and then, did I get that accurately? No, that's fine. But the listening, in the way I'm going to be teaching it for the course, the listening and the responding are two separate things, although they could come together. The listening and learning how to hold space is more about tapping into the invisible forces that happen when you sit with another person. And the powerful dynamic that can happen if you can just let it be and come from your heart. We'll get into all the details in the course, but how do you come from your heart and hear what they're saying, and also work with yourself. If you have reactivity to what they're saying, you have to work with yourself so you can stay neutral now while they're sharing. So it's an exercise in mindful awareness, basically. And so then, but if you respond to people, that's something else, because you want to really respond with the proper tone of voice. You want to have as few words as possible. You want to be neutral. You don't want to do it at a time when you're triggered. You want to do it at a time where you're centered and you've eaten a good meal and you feel rested. You don't want to do anything when you're on sensory overload. And that's a mistake that many empaths make, because they just feel like they can't take it anymore. And so then they express that to whomever. And it's always the wrong choice to do that. So what an empath needs to do at those moments is take yourself away from the situation. Don't call anybody, don't write anything, don't say anything you're going to regret, and just calm down. Come back to yourself. That's always the exercise, isn't it? The spiritual path of coming back to oneself when you get frenetic or when you begin to lose yourself in another person or you're triggered. It's always to close your eyes, start from the beginning again, and come to yourself in a compassionate, empathic way, and just calm yourself down. Work with your parasympathetic nervous system. If you like cold plunges or cold showers, go in it. That'll calm you down quicker. Or hum, chant, do the things that stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, and you will come back to yourself. You'll start feeling, oh, all right. No, I'm just going to be kind to myself first and foremost. Then tomorrow I'll decide how to deal with the situation. So you give yourself that room, but people tend to react when they're in the intensity of this overwhelmed state, which is not a good idea, everyone. Not a good idea. So I don't recommend it. It's just stop, take yourself out of the situation, work with yourself. And then you could be more empathic with the person, the next day. Find out where they're coming from. You don't have to agree with them, but you at least have to understand where they're coming from, so you can make the adequate adjustments. Let's say it's a work situation, or even with a partner or with a friend. You might not agree with what someone does, but you understand why they did it. And, you really have to respect that and not try and control everybody so much. And the great thing is with empathy, you will find people that you will attune with. And there's so much loneliness in our world now. And so much kind of alienation and not knowing how to quite connect with the world again, that this is the perfect time for you to develop an empathic way of life so that you can incorporate that, into what your world is now. And the connection is what so many people are looking for. And empathy will give you that connection to people. It's the way to feel love is through empathy. And so that's one of the great joys of developing empathy, is the expansiveness of the connections and the people.
Beautiful. It's so beautifully described. And I want to give us some space. I know you wanted to take us on an experiential group meditation for self-empathy. So maybe you want to tee that up and take us into that.
Yeah, I'd love to. Okay, everyone. I'd like you to close your eyes. Begin to take a few deep breaths. Breathe in to a count of 6. Breathe out to a count of 6. Another breath. And then exhale. And bring yourself totally in the moment. And whatever thoughts you have or worries, let them jump on the clouds and be taken away in the sky, so that you're able to be 100% present with yourself. And then I'd like you to investigate or ask yourself, what area in my life for myself do I need to have empathy with? And where haven't I? Where have I been hard on myself? What issues keep arising, or I keep beating myself up all the time over them? Just choose one. And it could be anything. You can repeat this exercise as much as you like. Then place your attention over your heart, which is your unconditional love, in the heart chakra. And begin to focus on the warmth and the empathy the forgiveness, and the kindness of your heart. And begin to show that to yourself with regard to this one area. You might want to say, I am so sorry. I've been so hard on you. I love you. I want to connect with you, meaning to yourself. I have empathy for everything I've been through. I haven't been seen. I haven't been heard. I've been all alone. I've been suffering. I've been depressed. I've been anxious. I've been in pain. And I'm sorry that I've been so hard on you, my body. I'm sorry I've been so hard on you, my emotions. I'm sorry I haven't been able to accept you and help you little by little get through this. But now I promise you that I will show you empathy and listen to what your needs are, instead of hating myself or having self-loathing for the difficulties in my life. I will treat you as I would a little child. I will take care of you. I will not beat you up anymore about this. I will show empathy to myself, my beautiful self, who has been through so much and has tried so hard. You can tell yourself, I am beautiful. I am deserving of happiness. I am deserving of health. I am deserving of rest. I am deserving of play. And I will keep repeating those messages to myself. And if I falter and I go back to my old ways of putting myself down, I'll take a breath and I'll return to a more empathic view for myself. And I commit to doing this every day and changing my patterns of being unkind to myself. And I commit to being empathic. I commit to being intuitive. I commit to my spiritual path. And that is what I want my focus to be. Oh, take a big, deep breath. Feel the empathy that's in your own heart that you're capable of. And know that you could come back to it at any point. You are one, you are whole. You are an empathic being. And I admire you and I support you. And with that, everyone, take a deep breath, pat yourself over the heart, and come back to be present with this talk and with us together, having shown empathy for yourself, which is a beautiful healing act.
I love that. Thank you, Judith. That was really so nourishing to really turn inwards and have that deep empathy. And I noticed in myself that there is a tendency to focus on the other, how to navigate the dynamics with the other or the environment. But what percentage of our time do you think ought to, really focus more on the self-empathy part of the equation?
A lot more. So many healers and people in service, it's so much easier to help somebody else and to focus on the needs of someone else than it is to focus on ourselves. That's just human. It just happens. I've talked to therapists over the years. It's so much easier to help a patient than it is to help ourselves. It's just some kind of fact of human nature. But what I'm suggesting in this course in developing self-empathy as a practice you want to have every day, this isn't just something you do periodically. This is a frame of mind that's a new mindset that I'm inviting you to bring in And it might, if you have a history of abuse, or you have a history of being raised by narcissistic parents, or not being seen, not being heard, it might take a little bit of patience to get into self-empathy. But it can be developed in everyone. And the great thing about the course that I'm going to be giving is we can do this together. The group will support you in this. I will support you in this. And it's often easier when you have that, as opposed to trying to do it by yourself or just with a therapist.
I want to circle back a little bit more on the boundaries, because I feel like that's something that's really important, and we've touched on it throughout, but maybe share just a little bit more on sort of, you've got different understanding, discerning what kind of person you're with, or like, but the general boundary setting to create that sacred space and kind of removing from the overstimulation or the overwhelm. Just a little bit more about like how to navigate that in the course of, oftentimes people aren't able to just remove themselves from people or circumstances, and navigating the whole boundary question when your natural impulse is to sort of be more connected and empathic with people.
Yes, of course, especially with empaths. Their first instinct is, I want to meld with you. I want to fix you. I want to help you. I want to be your healer. And unfortunately, that attitude will lead to burnout or being a martyr and not having longevity as an empathic healer. So you need to learn how to set boundaries. And sometimes the boundary is, I'm sorry, I can't do that right now. I'm sorry, I'm unable to, and I wish you the best of luck with it. And being able to tolerate that, because a lot of empaths can't stand saying things like that because they feel guilty because of their upbringing. As there's a common belief that if you're empathic, you have to be, and compassionate, you have to give all that you've got. And sometimes giving to yourself can be selfish, or you need to be guilty about it. I've worked with so many patients who are guilty about giving to themselves or setting a boundary, but that's just one of the obstacles that you need to address. Is that the type of life I'm talking about, the empathic life, requires a great deal of maturity and a desire for expansion. All right, this is not something you have to do. This is something you have to be attracted to. And it's working on yourself and learning how to set boundaries, saying, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that at this time. And being able to say it with the tone of voice that's nice, and to give a positive no, because no is often looked at as a punishment, at least in the past. And it's not a punishment. It's, no, I'm sorry, I can't do it. It might not be what you want to hear, but it's the truth. And if it's delivered with kindness and empathy, it will protect you. If you're the one setting the boundary, you're the one protecting your own energy, and you need to know what you're capable of. Do you have the energy to give at this point? Or do you need to focus more on replenishing yourself so you can get to a point of feeling good again? You don't want to just burn yourself out, giving. I've seen that with so many people, or they can't go anywhere without taking on the energy of their environment. If you go by a settlement of the unhoused, I have patients who they can't even stand up after that because they take on so much. Or especially with animals, if you have animal empaths who have a special resonance with animals, they cannot tolerate anything that isn't love with animals. And they get wiped out by the reality of what happens to animals, sometimes in our culture, which I won't get into now. But it's learning how to say, no, I'm not going to watch that piece of news right now. I'm not going to watch the news at all. I'm going to watch a funny movie, or I'm going to take a walk. I don't have to sit here and listen to, the news. It's all bad news anyways, most of it. So you're able to stop the addictions to the news. You're able to, say no to what doesn't feel right in your gut. What I've found in my life, that if something maybe looks good, but it doesn't feel right in my gut, and I go ahead with it anyways, only bad things happen. So you have to learn how to set that boundary with, this doesn't feel right for me. At least I'm going to pause. I'm not ready to go forward with this. That's the boundary. Because it doesn't quite feel right. And you could observe, you see. So you work with yourself, on setting boundaries. Or if, there's a type of personality you just can't work with, you need to know that. Like if you get, if you work with, well, I think a narcissist is a good example. If you have a choice about who you work with, it's much better not to work with narcissists and to work with people who are not narcissists. All right. So you have to decide what's good for you, and you have to be the defender of that. You can't wait for the other person to do it. And so setting emotional boundaries, such as, one for me has to do with anger, because I get triggered by angry outbursts, and I'd rather somebody just talk to me about what they're going through. And so I've had to set a limit on that, saying that I'm not able to be there, for a rage attack or an angry outburst. It doesn't happen that often, but I'd much rather set a time and discuss what's bothering them. I'm just not able to handle it. It jars my system too much. It just a limitation of mine, perhaps. But anyways, I don't like it. So I set a limit with it.
Well, it's super empowering, just even at your advanced level of working with all of these principles, that you need to give yourself that permission, and that's really great. So I want to spend some time now talking about your upcoming program explicitly, which we've referenced a few times, but it's really such a blessing to have this available for a really common and sometimes difficult to navigate quality of being an empath, and being able to do so with a lot of grace and skill, and really turn it into a superpower and a full blessing. So
absolutely.
Yeah, so the course is called Empathy as a Catalyst for Healing and Compassion. Discover the transformative neuroscience to heal, awaken, and lead with heart. You can find it at empathicsuperpowers.com, empathicsuperpowers.com. It's going to be a 7-week program, and it's really going to give you these foundational building blocks and practices and steps and distinctions that are going to allow you to really turn the challenges of empathy into the greatest blessings, and to really own the power that you have within you. So Judith, I'd love for you to share, first of all, just on a broad overview, like really the bigger why of this course.
Yeah, the bigger why of this course is that we need empathy to survive and thrive in our daily lives, with our relationships, and with the world. Without empathy, a world without empathy, or relationships without empathy, will just not be good. And so empathy, I don't care what's happening in the world or your relationships, empathy is the beginning of transformation and healing. In a relationship, or it might mean ending a relationship. But if you come from a place of anger, resentment, judgment, grudge, all of that, it will get us nowhere. We've come from that place in history for, eons. We want to be a new kind of person. We want to be the best in ourselves. We want to be the most empathic, and empathy is a healing force. It's been shown that when you witness an act of empathy, that it can help heal you simply by witnessing it. And Harvard researchers have measured the saliva of people who've witnessed this beautiful act of empathy, and their stress hormones go down, and the healing goes up, and there's all kind of bodily changes when you even witness it, because it's a healing force. If you were to be empathic with somebody and I'm watching it, let's say you're bending down and talking to a child, and you're really connecting with that child, I'm going to feel that. It's going to help me. You see, and that's a very powerful thing if you think about it, because you're not only healing yourself, you can heal others by virtue of who you are. And they might never even know what happened to them, but they feel better having seen what you've done. And so it's a way of treating yourself, healing yourself, tapping into the energy of empathy as a superpower to heal yourself with kindness, to help your broken relationships mend, or at least find some kind of equilibrium, or perhaps, not have them at all with particular people. And then, the final session will be on releasing resentments and grudges, and learning how to tap into global empathy, prayer, and the prayer body, the energetic prayer body, to help with the healing of the greater world. So it'll be a combination of healing yourself. First and foremost, we're going to start with you and how empathy can help you in all aspects of your life, and then go on to your relationships and see where the blocks are. And I'll have a mentoring session, Q&A session in every module, where I can answer your questions and help you specifically with how to apply this. And sometimes that's really useful, you know, when you bring in the practical examples of, oh, I'm stuck here and I could never be empathic with this person. I go, okay, why can't you? And to really get into it. And how can I protect myself and my energy? I'm so sensitive. Okay, we could talk about that. So it'll be an open dialogue of what comes up in the experience of leading an empathic life. Be very alive. Each module is different. And again, it starts with healing yourself. Then the second part of the course will be healing your relationships. And then the last module will be on the greater world and how we could touch into it and help.
I love the arc of the program, going from self to relationships to the world, really aligned with our whole mission at the Shift Network. And it's just such a great synthesis of leading edge science and therapy and spiritual practice to really give us these foundational tools. So again, the whole program is laid out in detail at empathic.superpowers.com. And you'll get not only the 7 90-minute live sessions with Judith, which is going to include time to ask your questions live. You'll get recordings of every session with video and audio, as well as word-for-word transcripts, so you can go back to study and highlight. There's weekly exercises for home, a Facebook community to support you and deepen your experience as well. Plus, there's a number of extra bonuses, actually quite a number of extra bonuses. There's a whole session from the Empath, Sensitives, and Intuitives Summit. You'll find that on the page. It's called Empathy Training for Sensitives. There's a PDF guide from Judith called Life Strategies for Sensitive People. And this is a great one. It's a PDF excerpt from Judith's upcoming book, The Genius of Empathy, Practical Skills to Heal Your Sensitive Self, Your Relationships, and the World. And it's called Igniting the Healing Energy of Empathy, How to Stop Overthinking and Come from Your Heart. You want to share a little bit more about that and the book that it's coming from?
Thank you. I'm so excited. I have my new book is, as you said, The Genius of Empathy. And it's about how to ignite your empathic superpowers, how to practically do it in a variety of situations so that you could grow stronger with this aspect of yourself. And you could begin to shift the fear and the anxiety and come into a place of heart and empathy with yourself and learn how to tap into and ignite your empathy, tapping into the biological systems in the body, such as the parasympathetic nervous system. How do you work? How can you work with that as an individual and ignite empathy in yourself? Now, how can you feel better from empathy? How do you find self-empathy? How do you even view empathy? What were the values you had about empathy growing up? And the chapter encompasses all of that, and it's an introduction to the genius of empathy. So we want to give you a special sneak preview of that book.
Well, it's exciting that you're bringing that book out and that we get a sneak preview. In addition, there's one more bonus I want to highlight on the page there at empathic.superpowers.com. There's a full video teaching from Judith called Empowering Your Relationships and Communication Skills, Secrets for Sensitive People. It's going to go deeper into some of these foundational communication building blocks. You want to share more about that special bonus, Judith?
Yes, I am passionate about communicating better and using empathic communication, even in the face of all the problems that could come up in communication. There's, I feel particularly strongly that there's a way through this in each circumstance. And so in this webinar, you'll get specific examples of how to bring empathy into your relationships and transform them, and what may be obstacles to that, and how you could overcome your obstacles and be able to welcome a more empathic view. It doesn't make you a pushover. It doesn't make you unable to set boundaries. I mean, as you'll see in the course and in that webinar, is that it's very possible to be empathic and have very clear boundaries and know exactly what you're doing most of the time in communicating and making choices of how you communicate with people. I can be irritated at you. I could do that. That's a choice. Or I can wait and I can refurbish myself, replenish myself, and come back and deal with it again tomorrow from a more together place when I'm rested. We can make choices about when we communicate, who we communicate with, and how to empathically reach people maybe that couldn't be reached just through the mind or through linear logic.
Well, that's a great extra reason to sign up right away. I didn't mention that's actually the special bonus you get when you sign up by midnight. So empowering your relationships and communication skills is what you get if you sign up right away. Gives you extra value and really extra wisdom to carry into your relationships. So it's a robust package. There's a lot of value just in the live course, all the bonuses, and really the community that gets formed as well. And really, it's all a lot about the practices. And Judith is here to really help make these things real, not just provide a little bit of inspiration, but really give you the leading edge thinking and the practices that can help change all of dimensions of your life to really flourish as an empath. So we've kept the investment for this program very accessible. It's just 3 payments of $128, or you can save 10% when you pay in full up front with one payment of $349. The course is going to begin November 28th and run Tuesdays at 11 Pacific, 2 Eastern. But even if you can't make those live times, you can still get the full value with the recordings, the transcripts in the community, and really the practices as well. So you can add this course to your transformational library for years to come. So I encourage you also to go to the page at empathicsuperpowers.com and read through some of the testimonials about what an authentic, warm, and wonderful mentor, the insights, greater foundation for personal growth. No words to express the transformation I've experienced except maybe enlightenment. Incredible, validating experience. There's so many rave reviews of Judith's teaching style and the wisdom of her perspective and the outcomes really that she's able to help you create. So you're in really good, trusted hands, and you'll have a beautiful journey, I am sure, if you choose to join. So again, all of the details are at empathic.superpowers.com, empathic.superpowers.com. And you'll get that special bonus when you sign up by midnight tonight, which is the Empowering Your Relationships and Communication Skills, Secrets for Sensitive People. So Judith, just a really wonderful hour with you. You're such a warm, wise guide for us. And so anything that you still want on your heart you want to share with folks who are considering going deeper on this path with you into the heart of empathy?
I would like you to use the energy of this talk and go out and practice empathy with one person, to begin to put it into action, and to feel, if you're feeling good inside of yourself or you're feeling, energized and connected, go out and just share it with somebody else. So you get used to the practice and treat yourself with self-empathy today. You've all been through a lot. Begin at the beginning, show yourself, just tell yourself, I'm going to show you empathy for this that you've been through. I'm sorry you had to go through this, and I'm with you now. So it's a way of reconnecting to yourself that you can do very quickly. And I'm positive your inner self will be very grateful to hear from you.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Judith, for just all the research and all the dedicated study and work with people to bring forward such empowering perspectives on empathy. So thank you, Judith, and thank you all for joining. And if you'd like to go further into this really important work, you can do so at empathic.superpowers.com. And again, that course is called Empathy as a Catalyst for Healing and Compassion. Discover the transformative neuroscience to heal, awaken, and lead with heart. So many blessings all. Thank you so much.